I was born in Sudan. By the law, legally, I am supposed to be a Muslim following my father's faith. I'm married to a Christian man. I got arrested or was charged with adultery and apostasy. My sentence was 100 lashes and death by hanging.
There's a pandemic of religious persecution that's impacting every faith community somewhere in the world. It's leading to massive human rights violations, suffering, and challenges at a global level. For that reason, I think religious persecution really is the challenge of the 21st century. How do we live together with our differences in a pluralistic society, respecting the rights of others to believe, and we agree to stand together in unity in defense of those rights? And until we find a way to do that, this pandemic is going to continue to victimize so many. And so we've got to find a way forward through this difficult time.
Persecution is diverse. It does include torture. It does include violence and things like that. But it can also happen quietly.
Persecution has always an element of violence to it, or a threat of violence. And we see around the world that there are hundreds of millions of people who are living in countries where there is a definite threat of violence.
80% of the world live in areas where they are susceptible to persecution.
All of us who are advocates want to see it get better. But the reality in the world is that it's actually getting worse.
And so when you see persecution based on religion, it's not usually just one religion that's being persecuted. They're all being persecuted together.
So there's authoritarian persecution where you have a country like China using the power of the state to commit a genocide against Uyghur Muslims. You've got extremism persecution in a country like Pakistan where mobs form and attack Christians, Ahmadiyas, and others and burn down their homes without any kind of accountability. You also have persecution in democracies where a religious minority can use the power of the ballot box to transform their beliefs into law and then to use the power of the state to persecute others and enforce those beliefs. And then you have the form of persecution coming from terrorism.
I live in a country where I have the privilege of freedom, and this privilege is a responsibility for us to support brothers and sisters all over the world when they need to have a voice and they don't have one.
It begs the question, what can we do? First, if you're a Christian, you can pray. Second, you can advocate. You can raise your voice, urging your political leaders to do more, urging your governments to intervene. And thirdly, you can work with others in your community, crossing lines of faith. And this is something as a Christian I think we're called to do.
Prayer is important because many of the situations are impossible. And so I think for your average person, focus on a country or an issue or a region rather than trying to take on the whole world.
And that gives us the urgency to try to fight for religious freedom for people of all faiths and also be advocates and intercede for those who are facing persecution.
Prayer is critical. I mean, it is God's first weapon.
Any effective response is going to require partnerships where you have governments, civil society actors, and religious leaders working together, speaking out against persecution. Here at Dallas Baptist University, we've assembled just an all-star group of Christian advocates who are motivated out of love of neighbor to advocate for anyone facing religious persecution.
For me, I mean, all through the Bible, you see references to speaking out for the oppressed, and it doesn't mention their religion, the foreigner, the alien.
But Christians are commanded. In Hebrews 13:3, it says, remember those who are persecuted. It's a command.
And if we are going to be Christ-like, then we are to do this for everyone who bears the image of God.
When one part of the body suffers, all the parts of the body suffer.
There are people who need us to intervene. We could be the miracle they're praying for, strike the match, to start the flame, to be the light of hope.
My son, my little boy, and I, God answered our prayer through people. Because God uses people. He uses people to do His work.
We can just admire the problem from afar and wish someone could do something about it, or it can spur us to action.
We're all part of a big movement that is answering a dangerous, widespread plight of persecution. What is God calling us to do as a church to respond to this suffering?
The passion with which they have said this. Then we've gone back to see them and they said, I was in the situation and I felt people praying for me. I was in prison and I was really depressed. All of a sudden I had the supernatural experience.
So when I closed my eyes and I prayed, and I felt this soft hand on my shoulder, I still, until now, when I face certain situation, I remember that moment. and a deep voice say, you are not alone. So after that moment, I was never scared. And this supernatural peace that I know that I am not alone and I never felt abandoned.
Start the journey today. Like, don't start it in a week. If we are not taking that back and putting it into action, nothing changes.
We are called.
We are called.
Vi har ett call.
We are called.
Nos sommes appelés.
We are called.
We are called.
We are called. We are called.
We are called.
We are called to love our neighbors. We are called to remember our brothers and sisters in faith. We're called to advocate for everyone. We are called.